Hello, my name is Debbie, and if you're watching this video, it's likely because a friend or family member has told you that they will be tapering off of a benzodiazepine. So I wanted to make this video for two reasons. Number one, it can be very difficult for someone getting ready to go through this process or already in the process to try and explain to friends and family just what the heck is going on. So I wanted to create something that was short and easy to understand. And number two, honest to God, I would have never in a million years believed something could be as difficult as benzo withdrawal were I not going through it myself. So I will be referring to my notes frequently. I apologize for that, but I want to make sure that I cover everything. So what is a benzodiazepine? Basically, it's a class of drugs that include medications such as Xanax, Valium, Ativan, lorazepam, clonazepam, and several others. They are given sometimes before procedures or surgery to help people calm down. They are sometimes given for people that have a seizure disorder or an anxiety disorder. Sometimes they're given to people if they're suffering a bad bout of vertigo. But most frequently, they are given to people that are going through a situation in their life that's causing them a lot of stress or anxiety. And that could be the death of a loved one, a divorce, a job loss. In my case, 5 years ago, it was the birth of my granddaughter, who subsequently ended up in ICU for 10 days in an induced coma. It was an extremely stressful period of time. And so I went to my doctor and I asked her if there was anything that she could give me that could just kind of help me cope better with what was going on. And it was at that time that she prescribed me clonazepam 3 times a day. So these drugs, if given for a very short period of time at the lowest dose possible, do not typically cause any problems. The problem arises when these drugs are given for longer than 2 weeks and at higher doses. In my case, I ended up being on clonazepam for over a year and a half. I had taken it for probably about a month or two, and then I had tried to stop, and I'd gotten really, really sick. And so I'd gone back to my doctor, and I was very confused by it. And she said, well, it just appears that you need to continue to take this medication. And so, again, that's what I did for the next year and a half. And I am not blaming my doctor. Unfortunately, there is a good number of doctors out there that are not as educated on benzodiazepines as they should be required to be. And they don't understand the possible dangers and difficulties of long-term use and how horrendously difficult it can be to get off of these drugs. So, first and foremost, the thing that I want to emphasize more than anything is that this is not an addiction. There is a difference between an addiction and a physical dependency, which is exactly what has happened with those of us that were prescribed and taking benzodiazepines. With an addiction, there's typically cravings and there's typically a high. That is not the case with benzodiazepines, nor do benzodiazepines affect the body the same way that something like heroin, meth, or even opiates would. So, why does it become a problem in the body, and why is it so difficult when we try to get off of a benzodiazepine? So I'm going to try and give you a simple biological explanation, kind of biology 101 here. So we have, amongst many thousands of neurotransmitters or chemicals in our brain, two that are specifically affected by benzodiazepines. One of them is called GABA, and the other one is glutamate. So what happens when we take a benzodiazepine is it literally lowers the production of GABA. So why is that a problem? Because GABA is the thing that calms us down. So think of a circumstance where someone has scared you, jumped out at you, or you've just narrowly missed a car crash, or any situation in life where you've suddenly been faced with something that scared you. And then you get a flood of adrenaline and other chemicals in your body, and it induces this thing called fight or flight. Um, and that happens so that your body can prepare to deal with the situation rapidly and efficiently. But when that situation goes away or calms down, then you'll usually notice within a few moments or a short period of time that your system calms down. Well, you can thank GABA for that. So, GABA, the thing that calms us down. Glutamate, the thing that excites our system. Also, the thing that's affected by benzodiazepine are the GABA receptors. So we have GABA receptors in our brain, and we also have GABA receptors in all our major organs and throughout our body. And why that's important, I will explain in a few moments. So, what is a GABA receptor? I think the best way to explain it is to just picture maybe a flower that's waiting to be pollinated. And so it's just sitting there waiting for GABA to come along and lock into that receptor. Well, what happens when you've been on benzodiazepines for a long period of time is this receptor or this flower basically wilts. They call it downregulating. And so what's going on in your system basically is that you have glutamate that's running rampant in your body that's keeping it excited, full of panic, full of fear, full of horrible anxiety, but you don't have enough GABA to calm you down, and you have receptors that are not working. And so this is the situation that's basically taken place in your body. And it is actually akin to what I would call chemical brain damage. So, the most important thing with benzodiazepines and tapering is that it needs to be done slowly. Unlike opiates and other drugs, it's not something that you can just cold turkey and have maybe a few days, a few weeks, or maybe a few months of misery, and then basically you're normal. That is not the case with benzodiazepines. You cannot, and it is highly recommended that you do not cold turkey these drugs because you risk seizures and you risk death. Also, if you try to come off of a benzodiazepine too quickly, there is something else that you risk that's called protracted withdrawal syndrome, which means even though you're off of the drug, you are still experiencing severe withdrawal symptoms, sometimes for years afterwards. So the taper off of a benzodiazepine needs to be very, very slow. And I tell people all of the time, because I have 2 attempts under my belt now that were not successful, but I learned a lot from them. One of the most important things I learned is that going slow works the best. It gives your body a chance to acclimate to a lesser amount of the drug, and you suffer less symptoms and less severity of symptoms. And so I tell people all the time, listen to your body and let your body guide the taper. A lot of times people will get on a very rigid taper schedule, and then it'll get them into trouble. Or they try to taper way too quickly, which is exactly what happened to me last year. And it became a horrendous experience that took me months and months to get myself stable again. And I was literally debilitated throughout that process. So, a typical taper, if you're going at a reasonable speed, and again, depending on how long you've been on it and at what dose, can take anywhere from 6 months to a couple years. And then, even when you are done with your taper, it still typically will take another 6 to 18 months for your body to fully heal from the damage that's been done by the benzodiazepines. So, again, it is an incredibly long and grueling process. So, let's talk about symptoms. And I have attached below a link to a list of symptoms. And if you take a look at it, you will see that there is well over 100 symptoms that are associated with benzo withdrawal. So remember when I was telling you about GABA receptors and how they're not only in our brain, but they are in all of our major organs and throughout our bodies? This is exactly why the symptom list is so incredibly long, because withdrawal affects everything in our body, including our central nervous system. So, in my experience, any single symptom on that list by itself can be very challenging. But unfortunately, what happens more often than not is you're experiencing multiple symptoms at the same time, 24/7. It's relentless and it can be exhausting. And I can tell you that there have been times where literally I was getting through minute to minute to minute because the symptoms and the withdrawals were so severe, I wasn't sure I was going to make it. So that's why patience, education, and encouragement is so incredibly important to help people get through this. So, what are some of the most common symptoms? So, anxiety and panic would probably be number one. And again, that goes back to the fact that we have too much glutamate coursing through our system, no GABA and no GABA receptors to calm us down. And unfortunately, for a lot of people, they can develop agoraphobia, fear of driving. When I went through my too rapid attempt at tapering last year, I literally went from a very social, um, outgoing business owner to someone that literally developed agoraphobia. And I literally could not go a block from my home without either panicking or thinking I was going to pass out. It took me months to get myself stable again. And it required me basically going back up in my dose and then even going up further, which can cause problems all by itself, which I'm not going to go into in this video. It can also cause terrible muscle spasms and joint pain, especially neck pain, shoulder pain, jaw pain. I have personally experienced really, really wretched neck pain and migraines, vertigo, dizziness, tinnitus, which is ear ringing, extreme fatigue and insomnia, digestive issues, weight loss. When I went through my too fast taper attempt last year, I literally dropped 20 pounds within 4 to 6 weeks. Sensitivity to light and noise, skin problems. I developed eczema and a lot of issues with memory and cognitive abilities, which is incredibly frustrating, which is why I have to read notes. So these symptoms just by themselves are bad enough. But the problem is when you are going through this day after day after day, relentlessly, week after week, month after month, what also happens is it's really common to get incredibly depressed. You start to feel really isolated. You do isolate because you don't feel good. You don't participate in any kind of social activity because you just feel too crappy to do that. So you become isolated. You feel isolated. it's a really lonely process because it's a long process. And honest to God, I think that people that haven't gone through it and don't really understand it have a hard time dealing with it long term. Um, it's really easy to feel hopeless. It's really easy to feel like you're never going to get through it or that you're different, you're never going to heal, your symptoms are worse than anybody else's. There's a certain amount of shame because a lot of people don't understand the difference between addiction and a physical dependence that was created by a medication that was prescribed by a doctor. And unfortunately, suicidal ideation and actual suicide is regrettably very high. And it's something that is understandable because it is an incredibly difficult process, but it's also one of the tragedies of benzodiazepines. So, what can you do as a friend or loved one? First and foremost, educate yourself. I'm also going to be providing a link below to a website called Benzodiazepine Information Coalition. It's an outstanding website. It just has a ton of information on it. I'm also going to provide a link to something called Benzo Buddies, which is actually for people going through tapering. But I have seen spouses, boyfriends, girlfriends, partners, friends get on there and ask questions. So it can be a good resource. There's also a ton of videos on YouTube. But I will caution you, there are a lot of horror stories. And so you probably don't want to watch them. And you certainly want to steer any family members or friends that are going through or getting ready to go through tapering to avoid them because they will just scare you really bad. Um, be patient. Again, it's an incredibly long process, but if you can be there for that friend or loved one for the long haul, you literally will be the difference between night and day for that person. You have no idea what a gift that is for someone going through this. Be encouraging because once again, you are absolutely convinced that you will never get through it and you will never heal. And you have some days that are dark, dark, dark. And to just have someone cheerlead or provide something motivating, a card, a little gift basket, something funny, an encouraging word, or just love, or even a hug can make a huge difference. Offer to help them. I have had times where I couldn't grocery shop. I could not make myself a meal. I couldn't do my laundry. I couldn't clean my apartment. And so to have someone that can do that for you is an absolute godsend, especially for people that have children. If you can help them with their kids, you have no idea just how important that can be. So again, I know that I've said it 1,000 times. It's a long and very, very difficult process. And I'm not going to say that everybody has a long and difficult process. There are people that are able to get off of these fairly easy with a minimal amount of symptoms. But unfortunately, there are quite a few people, up to 40%, that are going to struggle. And so, um, if your friend or family member is one of them, again, I hope that you will take heed of everything that I've shared with this. And again, go out there and educate yourself and do what you can to help them through this process. And so I'm going to leave you with this thought. I have been through a tremendous amount of emotional and physical trauma in my lifetime. And I will tell you that this is by far the single most difficult thing that I have ever, ever had to go through in my life. So when your friend or family member or loved one tells you that it's bad, trust me, believe them. It is. So thank you for watching this video. Thank you for caring. And I wish all of you um, big hugs, lots of love, lots of encouragement, rapid healing. And again, thank you so much for watching this video. And I hope that you have a blessed and good day. Thank you.